And we're live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Good Thing. Today, we're back, of course, with my co-host Jens. Jens, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
It's the same introduction every week. Um, Before we start, I would love to share a little joke that I told Jens yesterday that he thought was pretty funny. But how do you know if somebody is a Linux or NeoVim user, Jens?
They tell you.
Exactly. The first thing they'll do is say, "Hi, I'm a Linux and NeoVim user, and my name is Jens." They say their name second after they tell you that they use Linux and NeoVim. But I'm glad you found that joke funny yesterday. But today, we're going to be talking about what is a tab. So, a tab is a technical advisory board, and we've been rolling it out with our customers for a new product that we're building. And Jens has been a little bit closer today on the tab. I set it up, but he's been doing more of the meetings. So we're going to kind of do an interview style today where I'm going to be asking you questions about the tab, things that you've been learning, and then you talk back to me and explain like what usefulness a tab is. And I think honestly, anybody building a new product should set up a tab. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, probably. Before we dive into the tab, should we talk about current
Bella?
events?
Current trends. Yeah, we should do like a current
Current,
events type thing.
current trends. I
Yeah.
think a bunch of GraphQL experts are on the market.
Yeah. So you guys probably haven't seen this if you're not as deep into the space as we are, but last week or this week and yesterday there were significant layoffs at Apollo. Mostly the go-to-market, the sales, and the was it the product engineering side? Just kind of all over the company there was layoffs.
I haven't looked deep into it, but I saw some messages.
Yeah, so there's been layoffs on the Apollo team. As you mentioned, if you're a GraphQL expert, we are hiring. So take a look at our hiring things. But layoffs are never fun. It really sucks. Also sucks to see this when this is happening in our space. But Jens, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a question for you. We like to be transparent. We like to talk about things, and if your competitor has layoffs, how do you think about it? Because it if you look at it face value, like as a competitor, your first reaction might be, "Oh, that's funny," like, "Yeah, losers, blah blah blah." But we're not looking like that at Apollo. We're I see this more like a Formula One. You can respect other drivers. You can fight with them. Once you're in the racing seat, it's a race. You have rules of the race, but you can still respect your peers. And I think, yeah, from your perspective, because it actually has also negative effects for us. How do you think about a competitor having layoffs?
Well, I first try to remove the competitor part and I give the sympathy like these are human beings with families that they have to support, especially, if they're engineers or if they're within that team and they're supporting their families. So first is the sympathy part because, losing your job is never easy, especially in today's market, it's a little bit harder. Also, when it comes as a surprise, nobody wants to wake up on a Friday. This happened to me, and you're locked out of your email and you get some bogus email to your personal email saying, "Hi, you've been laid off effective today." So my first one is sympathy, like I feel bad. The second part is now looking at the overarching. It's never great when a competitor has a layoff because of two reasons. One is what does this say about the space and the market? Have they found something that they've experienced before us? Maybe they ran into a roadblock that we might run into later down the road. So it does put a little bit of fear into that part. And then the other part is maybe it's them. Maybe from my founder hat, this is a good thing. Like if you go into like the art of war, now is the time to strike. Our competitor is weak. But when you remove that side and you go back to the human side, layoffs are never fun. And I have the deepest sympathies for everybody. I actually got in a fight with yesterday with some stupid VC because he was punching down on all the people that got fired from Microsoft. He's like, "Why would I hire you? You worked at Microsoft. You're a big cog in the factory." And I was like, "You had the opportunity to be nice and offer sympathy. Instead, you're punching down to people that just lost their jobs." So I think the sympathy part is important. And then I also have a controversial take, which might get me in trouble. But Usually layoffs, and I'll explain my reasoning, is you kind of cut the bottom 20% of the quadrant not performing. You wouldn't release your best employees, but if you're a big enough company, sometimes people do get caught in that as like strays. So you might get some really amazing people that were just accidentally laid off, or they were too expensive, or maybe they just had some issue that the management didn't see. But the first thing first is always sympathy. I always feel bad when any company has layoffs, even our competitors. What do you think?
I have a multifaceted view on this. So first of all, my view on startup layoffs is this. And it's, sometimes I hear people being overly negative towards founders who execute layoffs. And I think that's so I agree with your part where you say, okay, you have empathy for the people who got fired, who got laid off. At the same time, we have to be realistic. If you join a startup, you should be aware how a startup works. And
Yes.
I think one fundamental concept of a startup is the idea behind a startup is we are not profitable. We are growing faster than we organically could. So we need outside capital to fund this fast growth. So now you have a problem. You have kind of like two lines. So there's like one line is what you expect that the market pulls from you in terms of like dollars. Like, so you say, okay, end of this year we want to make 1 million ARR, or end of this year we want to make 100 million ARR, or whatever. So let's say you are at 50 million ARR and you plan that you grow like 10%, so 55 million, or you want to grow 20%, so you want to grow to 60 million, or maybe you want to grow to 70 million. Okay, so you have a growth plan, and so to execute this growth plan, you need a certain amount of people. Maybe you have a function where you can say, okay, to generate this amount of net new ARR, we have to have this amount of new sales, marketing, DevRel, support, something.
Yeah.
So you have a hiring plan to achieve this goal. And obviously, nobody can look into the future. So we can make a plan, and we can have high hopes. And I would even say like you know I respect other founders, so I also think the Apollo founders, they know how to execute, so they make a plan, and then comes reality. And I think when you see layoffs, what this means is that there was a plan, and the plan didn't well, they were not able to put the plan into reality how they wanted. And or it's also possible that the company or founders or the management board, whatever, it's also possible that they have an idea how they want to execute something, or they make a project and they hope that they get something out of the project, and then after 6 months they realize we're not getting there, so it's not going to work like that. So yeah, I think on the one side, empathy for the employees who got laid off. It's a bad situation, of course, and at the same time, I also have empathy for the management, for the founders, whoever makes those decisions. Yeah, because that's just how startup mechanics works. Like, you want to grow fast, you have VC funding, and then there's this gap between your plan and reality, and yeah, it I think it can happen to every company.
Have you ever heard the quote? I think it's by Mike Tyson. He's like, It's about life, or it's about when you get into a boxing ring, which like symbolizes life." But he's like, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, and then the plan goes out the window. And I think you're spot on. Is like people will be very quick to jump on the founders, be like, "You idiot! Like you knew you were planning ahead. You knew that you didn't have the thing." And it's like, well, that's the whole point of a startup. And a good example of this is, remember, we were working kind of close with was it Conway? No, what was that trucking company? Conway.
Convoy.
Convoy, yes, yes. So Convoy, for those that don't know, they raised $1 billion in funding. and they went completely under. And the reason why is reality caught up to them. They weren't producing. Maybe the PMF wasn't there, and startups are very, very tricky. And people are very, very quick to jump onto founders and to bash them. And one of the biggest things, again, my dad told me this. He goes, everything in this world is because a founder took a risk. Everything that you have, everything that's invented, everything that a company produces is because a person decided, you know what, I don't like the way the world is. I'm going to go and I'm going to take a risk. And so when it works, it works. And when it fails, it fails. But the sympathy and the empathy is there. And I really think it's important. But I would add to your point. I agree. I think for management, it's tough. They have to go back into the red room. They have to figure it out. They have to see how to, keep everybody motivated, especially during a layoff. But I would agree. What do you think though about layoffs and like I see it all the time on LinkedIn, but like you wouldn't get the stupid quote by the way, you won't get laid off if you were producing. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Let's say I hire Lewis Hamilton, probably not the worst F1 driver,
Not the
and I
worst.
put him on a tractor. Can he be producing?
Yeah,
Like
no.
he's the one of the best drivers. I can also take Verstappen and tell Verstappen to I don't know to build a better framework to do federation. So I mean it's super simple to put it on the people. Being at the head of the company, I have the opinion that if something is not working in the company, it's always my fault. Like you have someone in the front line, maybe they have a manager, and maybe not. Maybe they report to me, or maybe they report to someone, and that someone reports to me, or that someone reports to someone, and this person reports to me. So at the end of the day, it's like a tree. I am at the top, and if it's not working, I'm responsible. Super simple. So just putting it on the like, if WunderGraph doesn't work out, I won't go to the engineers and be like, guys, you have fucked this up. Like th-
Yeah.
that doesn't
It's a
make
very
sense.
mature
Like you
it's a very
be
mature
honest
answer,
to
by the way.
yourself.
It's a very mature answer. And sometimes you see like CEOs trying to hide behind that, but really like if you're CEO, like you have to take the blunt of everything. If the company doesn't work, it's because of you. You didn't make the right decisions or the founding team. But I like that answer. It's very mature. You're deep in thought. What are you thinking about?
I don't know. I just think it's important to own your stuff and to not blame people. Like especially in a startup, if the strategy doesn't work out, who is to blame? Like I think it's super simple and yeah. So you're yeah. No, I think that's my answer.
It's tough. Should we transition into a tab and just kind of explain what it is and what we've been doing?
Yeah, I think it actually aligns perfectly with layoffs because layoffs means plan didn't align with reality. And what we kind of figured out over the course of like 2.5 years is um, you don't want to build a startup that where you have to push the solution into the market, where you have to invest so much into marketing and sales and everything to move on and or to get going. And I think we all know how it feels, or like I don't know, I know it, but you know it. I'm not sure our audience knows, but um, I think you can imagine if you don't know, if you have a startup without product market fit,
How it feels.
everything feels a little bit off. There's this pain. There's this I don't know how to articulate it, but somehow like you can have some sales, it can work to some degree, but somehow you I don't know, every deal takes forever. It's complicated, and somehow you're not speeding up. And yeah, the question is, Stefan, where does this problem actually come from?
It's a great question. And you mentioned sales, and a lot of people get sales wrong because sales isn't about forcing your solution down someone's throat. It's really listening to people and figuring out, hey, what is their biggest problem? Why is this their biggest problem? Why is this a problem within the company? And to a little iterate on the lack of PMF, like it's so interesting. Everybody will tell you this is that like how it feels. And I think Jens described it. It feels off. Like you come into work, there's some sales, there's some growth, but everything just feels kind of slow versus the opposite where there's sales a lot. Things are breaking, people are moving fast, people are talking about your product. And this really comes down to is really listening to your customers or to your users and to really figuring out what they want, but also what the market wants. And your analogy is great. Everybody says this to start a startup is that you can't push your way into the market. Like you can kind of get there or whatever, but if the market's not pulling you in, you're gonna have a really hard time. But I think to answer your question, where it comes from is that when when people are feeling the lack of it, is that they're not feeling the pull, is that they're not listening to their customers. They're not truly understanding what these people are doing, their day to day, and what they want from a product. What do you think?
What would you say is the best way how customers can vote? How can they very clearly say their opinion? What is the most obvious way?
To a tab?
Credit card.
Yeah, it's we learned this the hard way. I'm gonna tell a small little story, ends. So when we first started the SDK, do you remember? Huge company. We were so excited with them. We had a Slack Connect, and they said, I'm going to pay if you add this. So what do? We add this. And before you know it, they say, can you add this? Can you add that? Can you add this? And before you know it, Jens, the entire company was working to help this one customer freaking sign their credit card. And it took us 7 months. And I'll never forget, like, we were a little bit down and I was like, "Don't worry, they're gonna sign, they're gonna sign." And you were like, "When? It's been 8 months. Like, what the hell?" And we shut the door on them. We closed the Slack channel, and we moved to Cosmo. Cosmo was built in 3 weeks, but by week two, somebody was paying for it. They were paying for the excuse my French, but the dog shit version. It was very bare. I don't even know how they were paying for it, but they paid for it. And I think you're absolutely right, Jens. If they're not paying for it, the credit card is not attached, you're not solving something painful enough for them. You're absolutely right.
You know, the funny thing is, connecting to this anecdote from Stefan. So I think this week, a big, well-known company signed up on Cosmo and paid us immediately. They start with a small self-serve account, and they want to grow it. But the most important thing is they just signed up and paid, and members joined, and they are now building the graph with WunderGraph. And what did we do this week to did we convince them? Did they come into the door? Like, well, how did because I wasn't even involved in the sales process, but what did you do to make this work?
And just for clarification, this is the same company that a year and a half ago wouldn't pay us, and we just kept building features for them. So we completely stopped talking to them. We went all in on Cosmo, and the only thing that happened is we would have conversations from time to time, but
About football.
about football, yeah. So we were talking about football, and then what happened is we actually solved the problem for them. A problem they are willing to pay for. That's the biggest difference is that we didn't talk to them. We went all in on the solution and we were listening. And while we were listening to our other customers, this customer also had the problem our other customers have. But it was a big enough problem and they attached their credit card to it. And right away, they validated our solution, which was, hey, we're solving this problem. We could have spent, by the way, with the SDK years trying to convince people, but you cannot convince people to buy something. You can sometimes. But what's going to happen is they're going to churn because they're going to realize it's not a good fit for me. And I think you're absolutely right. By the way, nothing. We talked about football. That's all we did.
So you would say product market fit is someone comes to your website and then they click a button and buy the product.
Product market fit is very different definitions, but It's you're solving a pain big enough that people are willing to pay for it. That's my definition of it.
Okay. And today we want to talk a little bit about the tab because yeah, I think it's super important to share some experience in how to actually get there, because like a lot of the time you hear people say like, yeah, you just need to find product market fit, iterate, blah blah blah. But the real question is, how do you iterate, how do you get there? Before we talk about that, I want to share like in an open secret that we figured out, because I think it's just I don't know. I want to help others also find out something. We had a super interesting call. I think, was it yesterday or the day before? Like 2 days ago, we had a call with a company, enterprise company in healthcare space,
Oh,
and what we figured out is, we had discussions before about the topic of open source versus closed source and things like that. And what we learned from the market, because it correlates to tab and everything, but one big thing we learned, and we took a bet on this, is um, when you think about enterprise sales, one of the biggest hurdles in enterprise sales is there are engineers in a big organization. They are interested in solving a problem, but they cannot try it out. They cannot learn about your solution. They cannot get experience because their organization blocks them from trying something out. So we were talking with them, and they were looking into another solution from another vendor, like different market. They were trying to try, they wanted to try it out, and for more than 8 months
yeah.
their company blocked them from doing anything. And we see this with other companies as well, with banks or something, where simply like, yeah, they want to do something, they want to try something. It's ridiculous. But we had a sales conversation with a very large bank. And what they did is they did a POC with Cosmo, but they couldn't use their own graphs, because during a POC they can only use like play graphs. So they kind of used dummy subgraphs just to get experience with the software. And in both cases, the enabler to even get to the point where we can talk to them, where they can build experience with Cosmo, the enabler was open source. And
Yes.
um, we did this in the past, or we made a bet in the past, and we were like, open source is the right way, especially for infra. Like we want it to be simple. People should be able to try it out. And as it turns out, open source is such a big enabler for enterprise sales, because open source means if you are in this healthcare company, and you don't have to wait like 8 months or longer to get permission to sign up with the proprietary service. You can just download it, you can Docker run it. And I think, one of the biggest fears of people with open source is, but how will people pay for this, or will they ever pay? And to answer the question, or to answer something to that fear, I think there's two components. One component is there will be people who won't pay you ever, and you just have to accept it. Because if you make something open source or closed source, if you make it open source, they will use your solution. If you make it closed source, they will use another open source solution. So you can decide if they should use your solution or something else, but they still won't pay you. And
Yeah.
then there's the question, if you have a managed offering, is there any value in the managed offering? And for example, in our managed offering, like Cosmo, it's complex. You have Keycloak, you have Kafka, you have ClickHouse, you have other components. And for some people, there's enough value in having this managed. And then what we're also doing is we have a line. For example, we say in our cloud version, you will not get like advanced role-based access control, or you will not get things like SSO or SCIM, or you will not get audit logs or something. We think that's like an enterprise feature. So there's like a line, and then people can decide, okay, do I want the managed solution with those extra features, or do I not care? Another capability we're offering on our cloud is for every customer, we have a schema registry internally, like a private repository where we store all schemas and all operations for all customers. So before every single release, we're testing automatically against all their schemas that this new release won't break anything. So we can tell our customers, like, you can safely upgrade to this version. um, Depending on what kind of company you are, this can be valuable. If that's not valuable for you, it's fine. Like, you don't have to buy. So yeah, just wanted to bring up like the topic of open source, and I think how open source is an enabler for an enterprise sales funnel. Stefan, any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple comments on it, and then after that, we'll jump into the tab. But on open source, I think you're absolutely right because these companies are able to try it out, and this is just kind of for any software as well. Like if you take Lovable, for example, it's just a web app. It's not even an app. You just go there, it's a website, and right away you can start building things. And if you make the path to, hey, I want to try this out, to wow, this is really cool, the sales cycle gets a lot shorter. And for example, that healthcare company, they talked to us eventually, but they came already with a background of Cosmo, what they've done to run it. They've set it up in a staging environment. And if you compare yourselves to a closed source solution, you're 8 months ahead. So they have to go through SOC, whatever. So the opportunity for them to close with you is much better. And I think a lot of good companies do this well, is they have a great open source offering, and it is a funnel, but it's also not a funnel because open source takes maintenance. Open source takes collaboration. You have to run it. You have to make sure that there's no security issues with it, and you're offering it essentially for free. But where the value is in the managed offering, which is, hey, do you really want to focus all your time on running this open source piece of software? Do you want to be late on release cycles? And a good blog post is, Brendan just wrote about this, is when is it time to leave open source? And when is it time to like have a connection with somebody? And the reason that you just said is, how can I ensure that when I put this into production, that nothing will go wrong with it? Well, it's probably having a connection to the company that runs and maintains it at scale. And also, they probably have some internal stuff, some internal test suites from all their customers or things like that to make sure that this doesn't break for their customers. And so I think you're spot on there. Open source is fantastic. One, because if you really like open source and you get to work on open source, it's amazing. You get to collaborate with some of the biggest companies in the world. But two, from a founder point of view, it just lets people get running with your software. And yes, if you want, I think we should talk about it a little bit, like what's coming soon to WunderGraph Cosmo, which is, we have Cosmo, it's a complicated stack, and people might think like, oh, it's complicated because you push people towards managed or whatever, but you have some plans actually around that, don't you?
Yes. So because of our experience, where we kind of figured out that the faster someone gets to this is awesome, the more likely they will at some point end up in our sales funnel. So the more likely they will finally, you know, an engineer running Cosmo locally, open source. This is the first step in the funnel, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like sometimes sales has this negative connection,
Connotation.
or like,
Yeah.
I don't like it, because ultimately you have someone, they tries, like an engineer tries something out locally, it works, it solves the problem, they bring it to their company, and then at some point the CTO or the security guys, they say, hey, this is awesome, but can we do SSO? Can we do this? Can we do that? And then managed solutions are something that suddenly makes sense. Like we offer a SOC 2, stuff like that. So for me, the first step is we want people to be successful as fast as possible, to be able to try it out, to get to success. And what are we going to do? We will trim down Cosmo. We will build kind of like a Cosmo Lite version where we remove some of the more complex features that have heavy dependencies. And the goal is you will have the control plane, Node.js, and you will have a Postgres database. And then you have the studio, the front end. So 3 components. We bundle them together and we give you Cosmo Lite, and it won't have like maybe the analytics or other features that rely on Keycloak, ClickHouse, and it won't have like SSO, which we're implementing with Keycloak, and it might not have like the full feature set of Cosmo, but it might be good enough for many cases. And we kind of also figured like some people, they just start out with Federation. They don't need the whole thing.
Mm-mm.
They actually just want a schema registry and a router. And if you think about it, you know, you can try to force everybody to be your ICP, but they just aren't your ICP. Leave them alone. But maybe they can become your ICP in the future, or they let's say someone moves to another company, then maybe that company could be ICP. So yeah, the goal here is with Cosmo Lite, we want to help engineers to get started more easily. And if they are not ready to buy our cloud, it's fine. But
Okay,
if they want to do Federation, do it with Cosmo.
I like that. And it kind of transitions into where we're going. So, the topic of today's episode is a TAB, a technical advisory board. And not only do I think this is great if you have a company, I also think this is great for personal. Like, if you want to improve yourself, you should probably set up, it doesn't have to be technical advisory, but a board of people that you trust, or people that you want to learn from, or people that you want to sell to, or people that you just trust that can give you feedback back, people that will give you unfiltered feedback about your product or even yourself. And so, what a technical advisory board is you create, imagine like a board of people, like the board of directors at a company, or just a board of people that give you their feedback. And you set up every 2 weeks meetings on the same day. So we do Thursday, and sometimes we do Wednesday afternoon because our schedule is a little bit different. But Wednesdays and Thursdays, every 2 weeks, I think Jens has 6 meetings a day and with these people. And it's a 30-minute Zoom meeting, and it's no show and tell for the first couple weeks. You don't show them anything about the product that you want to build. Instead, you just talk to them and you listen. And we'll take it from the technical advisory board of what we want to do. And we just talk with them and we understand their day to day. And it's important that you build your tab with people that you think could potentially benefit from your solution. So we have principal engineers, we have CTOs, we have architects, we have senior developers, we even have a couple of junior developers. But we have that whole range onto there because a problem that a junior developer has is completely different than a problem that a CTO has. But you still want to talk to them and understand what it is. And this is from actually Adam Fenkel. He's this developer marketing guy, this guru, and it's kind of amazing. Like we set it up, and already in the conversations, what you're seeing is things that we're already working on, but it's so cool to see a customer say it in their own words in a way that you probably didn't have in your head. And so each meeting that you have every 2 weeks, the vision of what you're building gets clearer, clearer, clearer. And a little anecdote about this is if you ever heard of the company called Zip, which is a procurement software, they built a tab when they first started of 10 procurement people. And they had them pay, by the way. This was crazy to me. They had them pay and they said, I'm not going to give you the solution yet, but I'm going to give you the best solution in 6 weeks. But I need you to trust me on this. I need you to be my design partner on it. I'm going to build it to exactly what you want. But let me talk to me about the biggest problems that you have. And so for 6 weeks, they worked very closely with these people, this tab, and they built a product. And now they're a Series D company. And I think what we're doing with this world-class tab is you're understanding deep down from all these members what their biggest problem is. And I'll pass it off to Jens now because he's been the closest to them. Jens, what have you learned so far? What do you like about the tab? what are some of the biggest, antidotes or observations that you've seen that our customers have been telling us?
Uh, First of all, I think building a tab, it's a lot about trust. So it's hugely beneficial if you have already built a relationship. So with many of our customers, we are now together more than a year. Some of them have renewed already, and so we have built the relationship with Cosmo. And obviously, with the Series A investment, we want to go beyond Cosmo. We want to go further. We want to solve like the real problem. And I think what is super important, or like one way I think about it is you can have different classes of problems you're solving. So it's like a you can solve like a day one problem, but you can also solve like a day three problem. And I would say like day one, it's kind of like you're an outsider to the market. Like obviously everybody is sees themselves as an insider. So you think you know it, and you have an assumption about the market. So you talk to some people, you try to figure out what does the market want. You interview people, and maybe you get them to pay for something, like what you just described with Zip. um, but still, I think it is really hard to get to the nitty gritty when you are an outsider. So in our case, I think where the real benefit is, and this is something you can do on day three, and then like if you are past like seed stage, I think you should absolutely build a tab, and you should start trying to zoom out of your own solution. So what, like the first step in the tab, and the most important step is you can read books like Mom Test and whatever. These are kind of good to give you a little bit of a structure on how to conduct these meetings. But I think one super important point is you need to zoom out of your solution, and you need to just stop thinking about what you're doing, because
Yes.
you're going to be so biased. And it's even possible, if you cannot do it in an unbiased way, just hire someone external to do this. Because the less you know about your solution, the more if you're thinking in your solution, you try to connect it to everything they have, and it's like, okay, we have Cosmo. How can we solve all your problems with Cosmo? And it's gonna be very tough to find real gold. What you rather want to do is you want to see, okay, we have Cosmo, it's federation stuff, it's API stuff. So obviously we're not going to build a car or something. So we won't ask how people commute to work. Like this is not like a problem we
Yeah.
will solve. But what we can do is we can take Cosmo, and we can ask them like, how are you using Cosmo? And then they talk about what they do with it, and they build digital products or whatsoever. Like a lot of our customers, it's the nature of GraphQL. They do B2C digital applications like web and mobile. Okay. And so that's GraphQL. And because it's federation, it means multiple teams. So teams need to work together. So that is like two things that are kind of super obvious. And from there, you can zoom out a little bit, and you can just ask people like, okay, you're building B2C apps, and you're doing it with multiple teams. So then you ask them, how are you doing it, and what are the steps? And then you ask, what are the people involved, and who are the stakeholders? And then you learn, okay, that's like product owner,
Yeah.
developers, etc., etc. So you try to map out who are the people, and then you try to map out what are they doing, what is their day to day, and what are their top priorities. Everybody has like a to-do list. The question is, how do you get to the point where they completely skip their to-do list, and the number one thing they put on
Yeah.
top is buying your solution because it solves their pain. And so in the end, tabbing, it's I don't know. I think it's a lot of fun. You can explore how your customers behave, and then where the gold can be. And then I think if you start with your tab, where you want to get at is you want to find overlap,
Hmm.
because how can you bring your company to an inflection point where it rapidly grows like this, this hockey stick point? How do you find this corner? And I would say the important bit here in the tab is, and I will stop after that, maybe you have some remarks, but the important bit is, if you find a certain behavior in one of your customers and you're like, this could be our ICP, I see this could work out, then you go to similar customers, similar customer profile, similar behavior, and you're trying to, like, again, you're not biased, you just ask them essentially the same questions. And what you're trying to find is that they will give you, at least in some parts, the same answer or a very similar answer. So then you can take these stories, you lay them over each other, like one story over each other, and you see, like a heat map, how this thing, it gets warmer and warmer. And at some point you're just like, holy shit, we have found it. Like this is a repeatable pattern. We have now figured out, like, here's a pain point. Nobody is addressing that. They are using other tool that is not supposed to solve this problem, and they are handcrafting a solution. And we see this across all of them, or across all ICP. And then, yeah, now you're in territory where at that point you can think about, okay, how can we solve this problem?
I think you're spot on. It's you're looking for the patterns, but it's really important that you read the mom test, or at least just kind of understand how to ask these questions. You don't want to bias them with your solution. Like, totally forget about your solution, totally forget about your company, and just really talk to the person and understand what they're doing. Keep it within the same context of, like, what are their biggest pain points, but also like within the context of where you are as a company. But you want to completely remove your solution from it. And I think what's important, by the way, is the tab is who you invite. You want to make sure that on the tab is all people that you have not, it doesn't have to be a close relationship with, because, if it's people that you're starting out your software, you're not going to have a close relationship with them. But it's people that could potentially benefit from your solution, not a buyer, but potentially benefit from them. Because one, if you're starting out, this allows you a very easy and cost effective way before you put years into something that's not going to work, is to understand, is this even worth doing for somebody? Because everybody in life, especially with work, they have a to-do list of topics. And Jens is never ending. Dustin's is even more never ending. I have my list of to-do, but at the very top, there's three things that are my most important thing. And if somebody were to come along and say, hey, that number one thing that you have, I actually have a solution to your problem. I'm going to listen and I'm going to see what it is. And if it's a big enough pain, I'm going to pay for it. And what's really important about the tab is you're creating this board of people, and what you'll start to slowly realize is, whoa, customer A had that problem. Let me go talk to customer B about it. Whoa, customer B also has that problem. Customer C, whoa, like, this is very interesting. And it kind of feels like, I was telling Jens about this, it kind of feels like we're a pirate and we're going to different islands and we're digging and we're digging and we're digging. We found a little gold coin and then we find another gold coin. And product market fit is finding that gold chest, because you went and you've talked to all these people, you've got a gold coin, you followed the treasure, and then now you're at product market fit, which is that hockey stick growth. Because odds are, if 10 people are experiencing the exact same issue and it's very top of mind for them, I mean, just the law of effect there is that there's probably hundreds of people or thousands of companies that are very much experiencing this problem. But what's really important here, though, is, Jens, how do you know when, this is a really good one, is these people, we know them. We have a great relationship with us. They don't want to hurt our feelings. Nobody in life wants to hurt people's feelings. But how do you know to build what people actually want versus what we think that they want? How do we find that this is, I am being honest with you, because people will lie to you to be nice. They'll be like, "Oh, I love your product," and it's like, In your head, you should be like, that's bullshit. Keep telling me more and more and more. But how do you know to build something that they actually want versus what they're telling us what we want to hear?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question because if you have existing relationships with people, uh, the nature of humans is we don't want to hurt others. We don't want to hurt their feelings. Okay, some people do, but
Yeah.
uh, generally we
That
don't
guy
want
from
to do it.
the guy from the bank, you remember?
Oh, that's a funny. We got humiliated by it was so funny. My pitch was, we help companies ship faster, and he said, "Oh, we don't want to do that. We just want to ship 6 times a year." And yeah, at that point, it was very clear we're not a fit. Like we help people build better APIs, and he was like, oh, our API strategy is kind of static. And I said, oh okay, if your API strategy is static, then I think you have not yet looked into AI and what's going on. But okay, that's fine. So people don't want to hurt your feelings. um, so they will lie to you, and not because they are liars, but because they are humans. So I think it's super important that you tell them, like, hey, and you need to keep reiterating that, hey, like, forget about Cosmo. Just tell me, just just if you hate Cosmo, it's fine. Just tell me about it, or and you just move away the conversation from Cosmo. And I think also the most important thing, don't talk with your tab about solutionizing, because it's not about, like, if you ask them what to build, they will say, yeah, make Cosmo faster or something. But what is really interesting is talk with your tab about their life, their pains, their workflows, their problems. Just talk about the problems, don't talk about the solution. It won't lead to anything, because they have the day to day. They typically they are unable to zoom out and see the big picture, because they are not talking to 10 companies about the same workflow. They just know, oh, I have a ticket in Jira, I have to ship it this Friday, and I cannot make it forward because the backend developer is off, and they should have implemented the backend. I'm the front end dev, but I'm blocked, and now I cannot move on. So you know what? I'm just gonna wipe code some stuff, and I will spend some time on YouTube. And next Monday, I will tell the product owner and the daily Scrum that I'm blocked, and that's gonna be fine. So that's one part. Uh, yeah. To reiterate, make sure that tell them they can. It's fine if they tell the truth. Then don't talk about the solution, talk about the pains. And I think towards the end, if you are at the point, uh how do you feel? What? Okay. Let's talk about that later. So towards the end, let's say you're in the phase of, so you have feedback. Here's something. So then you build the prototype, or you build whatever, and you do something, you create something, you create a mock, whatever. um in the first session, you don't show anything, you just explore. Maybe you need a second
Yep.
session to explore. And then in the third session, which would be like week 4 or 6, you should have something, a presentation, a deck, mocks.
Okay.
Maybe you have a product in the making, a raw product. Okay, you show the product, and you get some feedback, and you just see how people react, and then it's super simple. Will your company buy it? And I think this is the most important thing. Sales, it's not so much about selling. In this case, in a tab, try, if you are not asking if they would buy it, then how do you know if there's
It's worth
real
it.
interest? Like, you know uh, you you can you can ask people like, what are your pains, what are your problems, and they can talk hours and days and weeks about all their problems. Will they buy a solution to solve the problem? That is the real question. So if there's no buying intent, if they are, let's say their buying process is they are an engineer, they don't have buying power, they need to go to the decision maker. So the first thing you can try in a tab is, hey, here's the product we're building. Is this solving your pain? And they say yes, it's amazing. And you say, okay, awesome. Would you buy it? And they say, well, I cannot make this decision. I need to go to Joe. And then you ask, would you bring Joe to the next tab? Can we talk to him? And they say, you know what? I think that's too complicated. So they are not willing to convince their manager to buy this. So are you solving the real, like, how important is it to them? Probably not so important. So you want other reactions. You want a reaction like, oh, this is fantastic. Can I try it? Like, let me try it. And if they want to try it, you can be sneaky about it. You can build hurdles. It's not always important that people pay you. Like, sometimes they can pay with money, but in the early stages you can also pay in different ways. For
Yep.
example, you can ask them, can you connect us to procurement, or can you send your MSA, or whatever? Just come up with an idea. What could they do? Just figure out something they could do, so they get access to the beta. What do I get? And the whole purpose of that is to get them to the point where they have to act. Because if they act, you know it has enough importance for them. If you say, can you send me an intro to your manager, and they say, you know what, he's very busy, then okay, so it's not super important to you, and that's kind of telling. And then you can have all sorts of in betweens. Like, you can ask people like, will you buy, will you pay, will you do a beta, like, just try to get something from them. Stefan, any comments?
Well, I've experienced this, and I think it's just kind of anything. Like, so life is all about selling, and Sam Altman has a really good blog post, like how to be successful. And I think the number third thing on there is selling, because everything you do in life is selling. It's selling yourself for a job, selling yourself to buy purchasing a new house, and why they should lower the rate for you. When you go buy something, everything is a negotiation. When you talk with people, when you talk with your kids, you're negotiating them. You need to go to bed now. I don't want to go to bed now. Why do you need to go to bed? And you're trying to convince them, and you're literally selling them the dream of bed and a good night's sleep and everything. And so when you think about it, everything in life is selling. But the important thing about that part is understanding what the other person wants. And from our point of view, like, yes, we are a for profit company, but if you take the profit away, the biggest thing about our sales cycle is that it starts actually after the deal. We sell to customers afterwards, which is we want them to be successful with the platform, and we want them to be, entertained when they're using the tool, they like it. But the second part is that they're actually getting value out of it. And I like what you said, is that it has to be like a symbiotic relationship. I give you something, you give me something, I give you something, you give me something, whether that's feedback, whether that's money, whether that's an introduction to your team. And
Access.
all of these, yeah, access. All of these, by the way, are like a relationship. I give you this, you give me that. I invite you to my house for dinner, you invite me to your house for dinner. And before you know it, we're very close friends. And sales is literally that, is that you're selling to this person and you're understanding what they want and what they want to get. But one of the things I want to get to is, I was thinking back on my times when I was an engineer. Um, I had no buying power. Like, if I wanted to buy JetBrains, I couldn't just go buy it. I had to go ask my CISO, "Hey, I really like JetBrains. Can I use it?" "Okay, well, why do you want it?" "Well, I like the global search function. I like this. I like that." "Okay, let me think about it." And I think it's really important to understand is, when you're selling to people, you need to find the person that can actually make decisions, and if this is a top of mind problem for them. And the tab actually helps you understand that, because if you remember, we have a diverse people in the tab, And a junior engineer might love the product, but he can't buy it. But what can you learn from the junior engineer? You can learn, oh, he might love the product. Who does he need to go talk to? He probably go talks to his manager. His manager probably goes talks to his director. Director probably talks to CTO. And you're able to quickly map out the journey. But I really like what you said, and I think it's really important is they're not hurdles. They kind of are hurdles, but I see them more of like a handshake. I give you my product, you give me feedback. Okay, you want to go a little bit further? I'll give you trial, you give me access to procurement. Okay. And each of these, when they break, it tells you right away. It's a filter, really, if you will. It's a filter that, hey, this person will probably never buy my solution. And that's okay. I'm just not a fit for him. But there's a lot you can learn from the tab. Based on all the tabs that we've done currently, I think we've been doing it just for 2 weeks. What are some of the most interesting things that you've learned about these companies? And you don't have to say the company, you could just say the company size, but what are some really interesting things that you've learned?
Ask me again because first I have to make a funny comment.
What is it?
you
What is it? Is it about the kids?
you mentioned everything is a negotiation, and you
Yeah.
said even why is this go black? This is so weird. Hello. Okay.
Try moving it forward
Uh,
a little bit.
forward. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it was there. Go forward. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
You said everything is a negotiation. Also, bringing kids to bed.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's so clear that you don't have kids.
What do you mean? It's a total negotiation. You're trying to convince
it's
him to
it's
go to
it's
bed.
not a negotiation. It's like you're
It's a
working with
hostage
a
situation.
psychopath or someone. Like just yesterday, I brought Leonie to bed, and you know, so here's the playbook. You bring her to bed. You say now it's sleeping time, and she's like when I so I typically cuddle with her or something, and then we talk a bit, and then I stay up, and then her first move is Jens or Dad, you have to rearrange my covers. So the blanket, like I have to rearrange the blanket. Okay, I rearrange the blanket. Okay, let's do that. So I go out. Starts crying. Okay, okay. Next level, then you try to offer like, okay, do you want to drink something or whatever? Okay, you bring something to drink. Okay, good. She drinks something. I go outside. She starts crying again, and I'm like, ah, come on. What do you need? I don't want to be alone. Like, come on. Every kid sleeps alone. Like we're in the other room, and yeah. Then next level, she still cannot stop, and then I want to see mom, and I'm like, okay, but we don't want to play this game. So you can see like with customers if they want to buy something like but with kids sometimes like there's literally nothing you can do because I don't know how this is in America, but in Germany, like the new culture is, or like when I was a kid it was normal to hit a kid when they misbehave. And
Same thing with my dad, by the way, in Serbian culture. He used to beat my ass
yes,
if I was bad.
but currently here the culture is you don't use force against kids, not in words, not with your hands, whatever. And so there's typically like a point where you reach this point and you're like, okay, if you don't do this you cannot watch Peppa Pig
Yeah.
or whatever. And then your kid is like, yeah, that's fine. I don't care. I don't want to watch it. And you're like, okay, shit. Like, what are we gonna do next? And so, just wanted to say, like, I will have a lot of fun when you have your first kids because you will realize that negotiation with enterprises is so simple.
Have you ever seen that meme where like this guy like was on a negotiation and he goes, "We don't negotiate with terrorists," and just so is that how it
Yeah,
is with kids? You just shut the door and you're just like, go to bed.
that's the same thing with kids. Okay, back to your question, and then we end the stream.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest findings or from the tab that you've learned in the first 2 weeks? Because I know we've also used some cool tooling with like AI to kind of filter through it. But what have you learned from these companies? And just for context for the viewers, these are Fortune 500 companies. These are emerging healthcare startups. These are some public companies in Europe. There's companies all over, from 50 engineers to 1,000 engineers to even more. I think like 10,000, something crazy like that. But what have you learned across all these companies?
Can you give me some hints what I'm allowed to say?
You could tease a little bit of what we're building. Don't say any of the companies' names. Don't say any of the companies' like positions. But what are you noticing that companies are doing? Like they're bringing together a bunch of tools for what? And you can hint a little bit on that. You can hint a little bit on like the biggest problem that companies are doing. Maybe don't say the toolings that we're going to go against, but oh, it's interesting that people are using tools in a way that they're not supposed to be used, you know? But just keep it high level. Or we can end it right here as like a cliffhanger for the audience. No, I'm kidding.
Um, okay, so if we start with GraphQL Federation, um, what we're doing is we're building APIs. And then you have to ask yourself the question, why are people building APIs? They build digital products. A lot of our customers are B2C. And so you then have to understand what is the process behind building these products. And we kind of realized that Cosmo is somewhere in this journey. It's one. I really need to work on this. It's one part of the big puzzle. It's one part of the journey, and we figured out that this whole journey from product idea to product in production, it's completely disconnected, and there's like so many people involved in, yeah, how do we bring this idea into the graph, and then the graph into the front end applications, or whatever, or we connect it with MCP to AI, or this kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of collaboration involved. Sometimes you have designers who build UI mocks, then you have discussions about user flows, then you somehow try to connect these flows and the UI sketches. You try to somehow connect this to API design, and then you deploy it, and or well, first maybe you mock it, then you deploy it, then production, blah blah blah. But what we have kind of figured out, that this whole journey is completely disconnected. And
Yeah,
I would say, for me, the most confusing thing is that, and I don't want to
spoil
you
it.
can you know the names, but how in hell is it possible that the whole competition is completely ignoring what the market is trying to do, or what our customers are trying to do? Everybody is so focused on GraphQL. Everybody is so focused on, I don't know, there's maybe this is a little bit of a rant, but there's working groups on how to reinvent federation, how to add new directives for federation. And I think this is not the real problem. We don't need another version of federation. We don't need a better version of federation. We need to zoom out, and we need to understand that federation as it is, it's okay, but also REST APIs is okay. But ultimately, this whole journey, how can we make it easier for people to go from product idea to product reality? And
Yeah,
if you think about this, you kind of realize that, I don't know, but just building a super graph and splitting it up into subgraphs, and then using GraphQL in the front end, it's not going to cut it. Like, this is
mm-mm.
good. Like, nothing is wrong with it, and I can give you many reasons why federation is great, and I can give you more reasons why I think for a lot of B2C front-end driven solutions, I think GraphQL and things like Relay is absolutely fantastic. And I definitely recommend it, especially when you have like multiple teams working on multiple products, backend, frontend. So I believe like GraphQL and Federation is a good architecture. It's a good pattern, but we're not solving the whole journey. And this is something that WunderGraph will focus much more in the future. We want to connect the different the different parts of the journey, and we want to focus on the overall journey. It doesn't mean that we're defocusing from Cosmo, quite the opposite. So we're investing more and more. We're making the team bigger and stronger. But ultimately, I think, and this is something. It's for me. It's a personal journey. But over the last couple of years, if you know my past, I started with GraphQL Go tools. So I'm the engineer here. I'm the technical founder. Stefan is the business guy. I started with an open source library to build GraphQL gateways because I thought that's an interesting problem to solve. And over the last couple of years, I kind of came to the point that, okay, GraphQL is cool, Federation is cool, but I want to solve
Bigger problem.
organizational problems. I want to solve like really high impact problems. And for me, that means I want to help organizations build products faster. And that really drives me. That drives the whole company now. And I think we're going in a super interesting direction, because what I was struggling with in the past is how can you justify ACVs, annual contract values, of hundreds of thousands or even millions?
Brilliant.
And the point is, you can't just make something proprietary and then say like, hey, it's hard to do, or it's scarce or whatever, and it's gonna cost 500K. It doesn't feel right. So there needs to be tremendous value. And so when I was starting with startups initially, I was like, I want to make money. And now I kind of transitioned into, I want to create value. And I think if you create value, if you bring a valuable solution to others, money will follow. But the focus needs to be on the value. And for us, through our activities with the technical advisory board, it's very clear where the value is. And then I can only encourage every founder to step back from your solution, and talk more with your customers, dive deeper into what is the real pain. And once you figure out pains, you try to find patterns. And once you find patterns, you build a prototype, you show a solution, and then you try to get commitment that people are willing to pay for that. And then you might be onto something.
Well said. I think it's a perfect place to end the podcast. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited about the next couple episodes coming forward. Next week, we're going to have a special guest, actually, somebody who's on our tab, who's building some exciting stuff at a public company. And he's going to be joining us next week. So, tune in for that guest episode. We're going to try having more guests onto the podcast as well, because finally, our content producer is full time. We've been messing with him this whole time, but he's finally full time, which is amazing. So, expect more content from us. We're really excited. And Jens, what's the good thing?
We're back next week.
The good thing is we're back next week. Is Leonie on the Jens scale support package or Jens enterprise set? That's a good one. I'd probably say support package.
Yeah, I think she's like a secret board member.
She dictates what happens.
Kids control your life.
That's awesome. Well, guys, see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.